Kalamazoo.
Tony, you got any nachos left, bro?
Dude, I ate them all.
Told you you would.
Shippers, never leaving any profits for us anymore.
That's right. I ate it.
Hey, we're live, guys.
Oh,
Outstanding.
Good to see you. Good to know you. We got the bodacious cowboy, the mustache maniac in the house, Jeff Dickinson. We've got Tony Darnell, who cooks nachos and posts about it, but doesn't save anything for anybody else. Good guy, though.
ate it all.
Knows how to ship freight. And we got Matthew Leffler. We were just talking before. Me and him have been connected for quite a while. Have yet to really talk, or
That's right. This is exciting. Thank you for having me.
The other day, I almost put a post out the other day. I get in these like handle it modes, where it's like I'm tired of hearing people complain and stuff, and then I'm like, nah, I didn't do it. And then I saw your video the other day on the Convoy DAT thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it was very it was very interesting to me too, because I didn't know that the business to business side of things too, but it also kind of just just kind of sparked again what I was thinking when it comes to how people approach non-competes. I think there's a lot of talk about them. People don't like them. Fact is, they exist. They're here. And my biggest point was, because I've been there before and had to put things together to protect ourselves as a company. Is it's a very blanket thing. They can't individualize each one, and it's really to protect them as a company. And it doesn't mean that they're against negotiating or talking about it. But the problem is, when you sit down and sign one, a lot of times you don't even know. Really, I mean, you just want the job, right? You don't really know what it entails or what it could do. And then 3 years down the road, when you want to leave, now all of a sudden you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about non-competition agreements, and I talk about them a lot because this is the problem my clients deal with all the time. 1 in 5 working Americans, 30 million people, are signing non-competition agreements. Most of the time, they don't have the ability to go and review them. Most of the time, they can't negotiate them. About 30% of people who sign non-competes are making less than $13 an hour. These are not things that are designed to do anything other than make it difficult to leave your job and make competition go away, which for some businesses is really good. For most consumers, it's probably not a great thing. But these documents have pervasive in every industry. We talk about them a lot in transportation, but they're in everything from doctors and anesthesiologists to welders and sandwich shop makers. All of these things are ways you can find to stop somebody from doing the job that they're trained to do. So I don't like them very much. I know a lot about them, and I'm happy to talk about them with you guys today.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I guess my thing is, I don't necessarily like them either. But I think, you look at nowadays, I mean, everything's out there, everything's public. I mean, you can find a lot of things, right? And I think they don't serve the same purpose they used to. And I don't think they're nearly as, not just nearly as enforceable, but nearly as worth enforcing sometimes from the company side of things. But before we even get into it, I kind of want to go into the difference, because I feel like there's a lot of people that always kind of talk about the difference between a non-solicit and non-compete. And then the one guy wanted to go back and forth with me on the fact that they're the same thing, because technically you can't take your, but
they're definitely not the same thing.
Yeah,
I'll definitely give the distinctions of what
things do overlap, right? There are some things that kind of cover on both sides, but give us the legal side of things when it comes to that.
Yeah, so
before you jump into that, and should I have my driver sign some too?
Oh, if you could legally do that, companies have in the past. They lose in those lawsuits, but they absolutely do. When you have an industry where there's 140%, 120% turnover, that's one of the mechanisms they use. But
not at our place.
Good, because they're not enforceable with drivers or mechanics, but people have tried that. What I would say to begin with is these are things called post-employment restrictive covenants. It's a type of contract that happens after you leave. So post-employment, you're no longer there. Restrictive, you give something away, and it's a covenant, it's a contract. So we talk about them, but here's some examples. There's non-disclosures. We all kind of understand and agree with those most of the time. There's non-disparagements. Don't say something negative about me. There's non-solicits. Don't poach my customers. Don't poach my colleagues or my coworkers. And then there's a non-competition agreement. Don't do this thing for this period of time in this place. So what a non-competition agreement seeks to do is to say to somebody, we're going to define what your business is first. Then we're going to say how long you're going to be bound by the non-compete. Is it a month? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? And then what is the geographic restriction? Are you stopped from doing it here in the city, or is it the county? Is it the state? I like to use the example of Jimmy John's because all of us in this industry love a good sandwich. And Jimmy John's had a non-competition agreement for all of their workers. And what that non-competition agreement said is if you leave the company for 2 years, you can't work at any place within 3 miles of a Jimmy John's store that gets 10% of their revenue or more from cold sandwiches. That's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. That's how it works. For a non-solicit,
How does anybody know what percent of revenue is a cold sandwich?
They send cease and desist letters. Oh, you're right. Don't go work at Subway. Go work at McDonald's. That's fine. Subway, So they have this idea of don't go work at Quiznos. Like this is the mentality. But in the non-solicits is really more about we don't want you to come and actively go after our customers. So you can't make a phone call. You can't send a letter saying, hey, I'm over here now. Come join me. Same with the coworkers, same with the former customers. Nothing stops you from doing your job with a non-solicit. And your customers or your former coworkers can reach out to you and say, hey, I would love to work with you again. Nothing in there will contravene that non-solicitation. So that's the big difference is one stops you from doing what you've been trained to do. And one of them says, don't go stealing my stuff. And then that's kind of how it works. And they both have to be legitimate to the company's interests. They can't just be, global or universal bans on non-competition, for example.
Right.
So here's the thing that I look at, right? So you go and you work for a company and say the ownership brought in their first customers, which started their company and they grew from that. That's the company's customers, okay? You have no right to go after the company's customers. However, if you come on board and you bring your own customers in, you created you built the relationship, you created a long-term relationship with them. You're doing great business. That's where the line is drawn the way that I look at it, because if you brought it in, that's yours. It's not the company that you work for, because without you, right, you wouldn't have those customers. However, the company's customers, I can see non-solicit because that's theirs. You have no right to go after them. I would think about the proprietary tools, the stuff that you work with day in and day out. I can see that, having that protection there where it's like, don't tell them our trades, what we did, how we did it over a specific period of time. That's ours, not yours.
That's a great point. Like if you have a book of clients and you're coming to a new company and you're negotiating your contract with them, carve out the ones that are yours. Like I do that when I have my own clients going somewhere. This is mine. I bring this with me. What people kind of forget is you're usually given these documents like the day you're onboarding. So you've already accepted, you already made the call of quitting your last job. And now you're like, oh shoot, what happens? And some states have now put in place restrictions saying you need to give somebody 14 days to review the non-solicit or the non-compete. Yeah. I am much less against non-solicits than I am against non-competes, but I do think any post-employment restrictive covenant should be shorter, generally speaking, and you should be paid for it. Someone should pay you to sign this thing, because it's really strange that every job that we have is at will. But if you leave, you're stuck with contracts that follow you everywhere you go.
So what happens? So what happens? You leave that company, right? And sometimes a lot of customers out there, they don't do business with the company. They do business with the person they like doing business with. That person leaves that company and goes to company B, and the customer goes, hey, listen, John left. I no longer want to participate and have you as my service provider. I'm going with John.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Absolutely. I think I look at it. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Sorry. My question is this. I got my my license from the movie theater seats. So I'm going to ask you an educated question. My license to practice law, that is.
Absolutely.
If I work at company X and let's say I develop a new widget and I develop a widget in my work for the company and that's my widget and the company gets a patent, because I can't take that with me when I go. Why is this different?
That's a great question. So when you create things as an employee, that is typically a work for hire thing. And anything you create is usually given to the company. Now, there are ways to make your own stuff. Like you could, on your weekends, prove to them you didn't use any company resources, any company time. Those things belong to you. So a company may have you sign a contract saying anything that you invent, even 6 months or a year after working with us, you're going to assign those to me, the company. And people sign those because they don't understand. But to
Wow.
your point, you can certainly create things that aren't owned by the company. But if you're doing it on company time with company resources, or it's part of the company's goal, it probably does belong to them. And
So
Well,
isn't that creating a book of business?
well, it
Yeah.
kind of, but not exactly. So
Well, here you go, Tony. Let me get to my point here. So the strategy a lot of people used up to this point, this is why we're here to give strategies, right? Was this strategy right here. Okay. So they thought, hey, I've got a non-compete. I'm just going to disappear. Right. I got a non-solicit. I'm just going to disappear. Right. And so now all of a sudden you see me in public. What are you thinking? Weird.
Psycho.
You're trying to wonder what's going on. Tony doesn't care. He hates me anyways.
I wouldn't see you in public.
Right. The point is, my main thing of this is having a conversation, understanding what it is exactly they're wanting to protect at the time. When I had a non-compete at one point and I left, I had started with the company. So the owners and the VP, they were all like, hey, it's not a big deal. Just don't, F us over or whatever. I had a lawyer review it. He's like, hey, maybe just send over a thing saying, hey, TJ, we just don't want you going after these specific these core accounts we have. Everything else, you're good to go. But at the same time, they were more worried about recruiting at the time, especially in the last, year and a half. They were worried about me taking employees. They weren't worried about accounts. Right. And that's how a lot of times it is. So it's like, I had an idea of what it was I had to be a lot more careful on compared to what I wasn't. So instead of disappearing and having them going, where's TJ at? What's he doing? Where's he at? Or who do you go work for? Like, what's he doing? Let's keep an eye on him. Somebody keep an eye on him. No, it was a upfront conversation right off the bat. And, my lawyer just said, hey, just have him put it in writing. I sent it over. It was no big deal. They had no problem with it. They were like, yep, absolutely. You know what I mean? And we kept a great relationship. But I think having those conversations, and it costs money to have a lawyer review it, of course, but having those conversations is what can really help relieve that stress, relieve that, tiptoeing around and trying to hide and blend in, which I know none of you guys can even see me. I don't even know why my camera's on, but because it's not the strategy that works the best.
Well, I mean, you've added the great point here is 90% of people do not negotiate these contracts. Like they just sign them because they don't understand. And very few people have relationships with attorneys where they would go, hey, can you review this? Not knowing it might cost them $100 or $500 or $1,000 to go through a document and say, here's what you need to be worried about. So at the end of the day, when people are trying to make these decisions, we need time. Like the advice I give to every single client is if you're presented with a document that you don't understand, tell them you need more time. Tell them you want to get a lawyer. Just ask for time. That is the very first step in negotiation, is getting yourself time to think about this without the pressure of someone saying, I'm going to rescind the job offer. It's hard if you've already worked at the company for a couple years and then you get a non-compete drafted given to you where it's sign or get fired. That's really hard to deal with. And most people simply sign because they don't have that runway to say, I can live for a couple months without a job. They need to have the job. That's why these non-competes and non-solicits to a lesser extent are so dangerous for so many people, because they limit your opportunities in major ways that you don't understand until you leave the company. So negotiating up front is always a way to do things.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest thing too is I believe at least part of it, and this includes non-solicits as well, because I don't think non-solicits are going anywhere, especially with how big the sales world is. But I think, for a company, I think when a company gets to the point where they're confident in what they're doing and how they're doing it, they're not too worried about it as much. I think it's the ones that, are, not confident in the fact they can handle accounts or whatever it is. But I think, it also depends on, like, if you leave on a good note or a bad note. and some companies are way worse than others. You know, I know a buddy, Tony knows, you know, that they're ruthless. But it was kind of a situation which he kind of disappeared, kind of left kind of weird, like, you know, like it was kind of, I think it put a bad taste in their mouth. But I think if they're going to have, you know, I think if you're going to have this like mandatory, right, to sign, I think one thing that they could maybe pass in legislation, I don't know how they do it, but is having, so just like when you go in and you start off, right, the HR takes you through a slideshow talking about, you know, their rules, their, you know, the dress code, or you got to watch a video on sexual harassment, whatever, you know what I mean? Like there's those things that are kind of put in place because they're compliant and whatnot. If you had that, you know, at the very beginning going, hey, this is what a non-compete is. This is what ours is, actually.
Yeah, they'll never do that. But I would say that it's about educating people in college and in high school about what you're going to expect in the workforce. Like no one comes and tells you, hey, when you get a job, you're going to be presented with documents, and the documents are going to restrict things that you're able to say or do after you leave. No one is out there educating people about this. I would love to see law pass, and this would never happen, where you have to disclose in the job description what contracts you're going to have to sign. Like here at our company XYZ, we have a great team and we have a non-compete for 2 years. And if you
these
leave,
are great interview questions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Nice.
For anybody, that's like, Tony, you're 100% right. Like when you're talking to a new company, you're in the beginning phases. What they like to do is have you go through several panel interviews. So you've invested your time, you start thinking about yourself in that new role, and then they find the non-compete, and you're already down that pathway. If you're a job applicant looking around, ask those questions early and often. What post-employment restrictive covenants will I be required to sign as part of your team? Now, I will mention we have federal regulation right now aimed at non-competes. The FTC has put out a proposed rule to ban non-competes all across the country. I'm excited for it, but I want to be very candid. It is going to be a hard fight. The industry has come out and extended the comment period. Over 11,000 comments have been made, and they are heartbreaking. But when that rule becomes a final rule, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and many other lobbyists will sue that day to stop it. Because this rule is going to require is every employer to give individualized notification to 30 million people that non-compete you signed 5 years ago, that's not there anymore. Do they want to do that? Absolutely not. No. So the question is, does the FTC have the authority under their statute to do this rule? And it's hard to say. And so that will be litigated. So we might be able to get a final rule that is in our favor, but it may not actually be something that we can rely on ultimately.
Also, I have a question here from the comments. It's actually not from the comments. It's from me.
Tony, go ahead.
Let's just say I'm not at Lippert and I end up changing jobs because I'm going to retire here and it's awesome. But let's just say I go to work at like XYZ brokerage and I signed a non-compete, didn't know it. I just onboarded and signed that stack of stuff. I want a new job and I go and they offer me this non-compete and they get up front. And I know now because I farmed and I this, and then I ask, what will it take for me financially and time wise to get somebody to review that? I mean, is it a $500 review? Is it a $100 review? And is it going to take 3 months for them to get this done, or can I get it done tomorrow?
Yeah. So
and get a response.
The way that I work, every lawyer's different. I typically charge $100 to review a non-competition agreement.
Oh my God.
I get that information back within about 24 hours because this is a very time-sensitive thing. I mean, your life changes dramatically when you're subject
in the private chat. Can you give me your number? Because
I wish I would have known that because I definitely paid more than that.
Look,
yeah,
that's
worth every penny.
When I look at a non-compete, I'm very specific. I am looking at the non-compete. I don't care what they're paying you. I don't care what your benefits are. That doesn't matter to me. That's your place to negotiate. What I care about is what happens to you when shit goes sideways. And if you're in a position where you don't know what you're going to do next and you're worried your former company's going to sue you, here's the thing they don't talk about. Many new employers ask the question, what post-employment restrictive covenants are you bound by? And if you don't disclose them, they fire you. So this is I'm passionate about this. Where did non-competes come from? They came after the Civil War. Why? Because after people were liberated and no longer able to be indentured servants or slaves, they had to find a way to stop them from leaving the place they were working at. So they make these documents that said, if you want to get a new job, you can't. And if you don't, we'll sue you. So at the end of the day, I really don't want people to sign non-competes, but I can't rely on the feds because that's not going to work. The FTC rule probably won't be successful. There's bipartisan legislation in Congress called the Workforce Mobility Act. If you care about this industry, call your reps, call your senators and say, pass the Workforce Mobility Act.
Taking
But
notes.
at the end of the day, if I can help somebody not sign a non-compete, and my God, it is so heartbreaking when someone's so excited about a new job, so excited about the opportunity for me to say, hey, that's an 18-month non-competition agreement. And it binds you to not work with brokers or work with carriers or with shippers. What are you going to do? Leave the industry.
Yeah.
This is what makes me so frustrated. So that's how I do it. Now, I am very busy with non-competition agreements. Many of them I do pro bono for free because people don't have the money. If they're making 30 or 40 grand a year and they have a non-competition agreement, what am I going to do? I'll tell you not to sign it. That's what I'll do. And then people say, well, I got another option. Fine. So I'm sorry for being so talking fast, but this is an issue that I'm passionate about.
No, I love it. And
Yeah.
Hayden even said, I get fired up when ML gets fired up. But I think, the other thing is like you said, having it reviewed, doing it right. So there's a lot of talk around it. And, I've been around, I kind of know some things you can do. People talk about, oh, you could do this, you could do that to get around things or whatever it is. Just, I think that it's tough because you're just going to get yourself caught up even more. And then now, if you do get into something, now they can use that as discovery to question your integrity or whatever it is. And so
there's a piece I'll mention here is there's a thing called blue penciling, and this is lawyer talk. So blue penciling is when a contract comes in front of a judge and the judge says, this is not legal in our state. What happens? Does that clause get thrown out? No, it doesn't. What ends up happening is they blue pencil it. They change the contract to make it enforceable in that jurisdiction. This is what that company in Ohio deals with every single day. They know their non-compete's unenforceable. They know it, but they allow the judges to reform them with blue penciling. So if people go in there saying, well, actually, it's not enforceable, don't believe them. Don't believe them. Anything you sign is probably enforceable in some form or fashion. So be prepared for that eventuality.
And even if what to do and all these things like that, right? You're still going to run into, the fact if you have one, whether or not, when I was looking at new roles, right? I was talking with one company and again, buddy, me and Tony know. And the biggest thing for them was they were small, right? That's what I wanted to. I wanted to stay in that and help grow a company. They wanted to bring me on, big role, big salary, everything. But because I had that, I even had, my owners that, and my old bosses that were like, hey, everything's good, everything's fine. They just couldn't, they had their lawyer review. They just couldn't mess with it. They didn't want to even mess with it because there's a lot of companies that can bully you around, right? Knowing that they probably may not win, but it's going to cost you money, right? It's going to cost that company money. And it's going to be something that even if they don't, they can kind of bully you around. And so you'll still have limited opportunities sometimes because of that. So
it's a letter that follows you. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, getting things in writing. And I think my question is this. If you, just like, I always thought it was kind of, so when I first started brokering way back in the day, I'd send a carrier packet, carrier would send it back and it had red lines in it, right? The carrier contract. And I remember going to my own, and I always thought that was so shady or weird or whatever. And I went to my own, he's like, a lot of times, he's like, it's not a bad thing. It means they actually reviewed it, looked over it. He's like, and if you actually look at what they redlined, sometimes it makes sense. It's a very blanket contract.
Yeah.
So then I saw that as that. So I guess my question would be, I've always thought, when you sit down, where does it put you in their eyes? Or I guess it depends on the company, but how many people do you know even that red line?
Everybody
in a non-compete before signing.
Everybody. And I want everyone to be passionate about redlining. This is the greatest gift you have is how you negotiate. So we are, as Americans and just consumers of modern technology, we're used to this thing called a contract of adhesion, which is a cell phone terms and conditions thing, or going to a social media company has, here's our terms and conditions. You don't get to negotiate with Microsoft about how LinkedIn works. You just don't. Like, that's what they get to do. But in our world as business professionals or working Americans, we get to say yes and no to things. And so what I recommend everybody do, you don't need a lawyer to redline something. First of all, you don't need to have that. You can look at something and say, this clause says non-compete. I'll just cross it out. and see what they do. And some companies will be like, yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But some companies will say no. I've had clients that have redlined non-competes with my help, and they come back and the employer says, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And then at least you know, is it a condition
Right,
of employment
right.
to have this document? Red line to your heart's
And I think
content.
so. And I think, my main thing too is that's the answer I wanted to hear, because it leads into what my thought was that, then, like I said, when I was inexperienced and I saw redlining, I saw it as kind of shady or what's going on. And you may have that then. You may be interviewed by somebody that just became a pod leader and they're hiring for their pod, or somebody, an HR person who's fairly inexperienced. I think if they like you and you have an educated discussion and you're articulate about it and what you're doing, if that goes to you, the good news is if it goes to ownership, if it goes to people who are experienced, they're going to see it in a different light. They're not going to see it as like you're being shady or anything like that, right? They know they've probably dealt with non-competes of their own even in the past, knowing that it's something they got to kind of tiptoe around or may have to deal with. And so I think, that coming up front, knowing that, hey, no matter what happens here, like that's fair, right? I mean, we don't have to deal with it then later on.
I do think it's fascinating because the point you brought up, TJ, makes a lot of sense. Like people look at when you red lines on a change, they're like, wait, are they trying to trick me? Is this something going on? Like
exactly.
you have a mortgage contract or a rental agreement for an apartment, and you try to red line people, like, what are you doing? But it's important for everyone to understand that this is how you protect yourself. And it is important to understand that a document is just a document until both parties agree. And so if an employer gives you a document and says, hey, just so you know, we had lawyers who were paid very well to do this against you. It's in our favor. Everything in this document's in our favor. Wouldn't it be great if you just agreed to that? Most people are like, yeah, sure, I guess. But there's got to be a group of people who go, well, we negotiated my salary, we negotiated my time off, we negotiated my start date. Why can't I negotiate literally anything in this document? And there's things you're not going to get rid of. There's parts that they're probably never going to go away. But these things like the repayment plans or the non-solicits, the non-disclosures, the non-competitions, all of those can be things you negotiate and hopefully get rid of.
Mm-hmm. And business is business. I mean, this industry is just it's different. I'm very loyal, right? So I'm like a if I go work somewhere, like that's where I'm going to be, right? But the problem is that, like, until you get to the understanding of how it works, and the fact that, you can find anybody to replace anybody, and it's cutthroat when it comes to customers and sales and things like that. I mean, there's things that you can do, that you have to do. And the mindset, being, at an executive level, and I talk to people that are, maybe an account manager, operations, I'm in those meetings and I'm in those things. And sometimes their mindset and what they're thinking about, right, what they have to think about day in and day out is totally different than what somebody, down on the floor or is dealing with day to day. They've got numbers they got to hit. They may have funding. They may have a board they got to answer to. They may have, depending on what it is, and they have to be, business oriented and separate that. Right. And so they could still do that if you have a conversation with them. Right. I mean, they could still have that and protect themselves as long as you're having that conversation. And I will say this too, from the other end, I said before, do it right. Because if you think you're smart, you're not. And you may get away with it, but I have sat and I have had, HR people, send over the resume and the non-compete, everything's done. I had to review real quick before we approved. And there's people that'll go in and they'll date it 2 years prior. Right. I mean, they'll sign it. And so if it's 2023, they sign it for 2021. That way, or they'll sign it, a different name. I've seen leaving the date blank with a different name. And that right there instantly lets me know that I don't want to hire you.
They may think that they're getting around it, right? Like all we need, again, and then there's a great question here from Nick in the chat that I'll answer, but like, understand this. I have all these pieces of paper on my wall. I trained to put people in boxes. Like my job was to make a contract that you couldn't escape. And you wouldn't realize you feel so comfortable as I put the box around you. And so why do people sign these? Well, one of the reasons people sign them is they don't understand them. That's a number one thing. But also we as employers make you feel so good. You're part of the team. We're going to send you a thermos and a vest and even a hat and all of these things. All you have to do is just sign the document. Just sign it, because we're never going to leave. Everybody goes into like a marriage. Everyone assumes it's going to last. It'll be perfect. No problems. And then they become problems. And then you realize this was a very one-sided negotiation. And so I think people sign these things, one, for fear to an extent. They don't want the employer to think that they're difficult to work with, because the minute you say, hey, I love this job, but I don't like this document, they might go, well, this person isn't a team player. And that's what they do. Because again, we train HR people, we lawyers train HR people to trick you. That's our job. Our job is to benefit the company. If you hire me as your lawyer, I'm a fiduciary. I put your needs ahead of my own. And when you're doing this for a corporation, I put the corporation's needs ahead of my own. And so we are very, very good at tricking you. And these non-competes are very dangerous because you will lose your career. I mean, we have the medical side's really fascinating. Doctors in rural areas sign a non-compete, can't work in an area for 50 miles. Where are they going to live? Where are they going to practice when they are 50 miles away from the major metro? They leave the area. You leave because that's what the non-compete forces you to do. So these things have really perverse consequences when it's all said and done. But there's lazy leaders up there who say, well, the non-compete actually drives retention. Doesn't.
And it's just like anything in any industry. There's a lot of people that have done it, that have done companies wrong and have been shady and have been double dipping or whatever they're doing and cost the company a lot of money. And I think there's a lot of people that, if you look at people that are owners or at the top, they've been in a long time, they've been burned, and you get burned in this industry. I mean, you do. You get so super. I mean, it's so crazy. When I was first coming up and I was talking to some of these older guys that were great guys and everything, but they've been burned. So they don't trust anybody. I mean, their advice literally to me was, don't trust anybody in this industry. Like, that's what they tell me. Not even me. Don't trust me either. Protect yourself. This is what you should do. And I learned a lot from that.
But businesses,
you know what, too? The biggest thing is an at-will employment stat in a specific state. So let's say that you go and you sign this non-compete, non-solicit, and you work there a month or two, and you're like, you know what? This place sucks. I don't want to work here anymore. You got that sign. You signed that non-compete, that non-solicit. You work there 2 months, and you're destroyed.
Those
negotiation thing. That should be a negotiation.
Sometimes the court will throw them out if you haven't been there for a certain period of time, but it's state by state. But I will say, like, as companies, we all want competition. Oh my gosh, competition makes me better. When I have really tough competitors, I'm happy. I don't want to be a monopoly. I want to fight in the trenches and be the best thing for my customer. Non-competes make companies lazy, because what they end up doing is say, all we're going to do is we're going to build a moat, and the moat's going to be any of our former people that learn about our business. We'll just sue them, and then they won't do it anymore. And even with non-solicits, it's the same kind of thing, because how these things get enforced is the same way. I send a cease and desist letter to you and your new company. And your new company, if you didn't tell them that I had a document with you, you're losing your job. Yep. And if you did tell them and you see a cease and desist, you go, okay, if I fire you now, could you sue me? No. If I keep you and you do get sued, do I get sued? Maybe. You should leave. You should go now. This is a very calculated maneuvering. And it's, again, designed to drive retention, but ultimately to starve your competitors of talent. And what that means is that all of us get dumber, because good people are locked out of the business. In my industry of maintenance and repair in the past, I'd have managers or leaders go off and make a competing business. Good for them. What makes customers stay with me is good quality service. If I can't deliver that, okay, I probably shouldn't be in the business anymore. But again, I really hate.
I don't have a huge problem with non-solicits, because I think they cover that. Because the thing is you really think about it, when any employee, like if you when we fire somebody, right? If I've ever fired, the first thing we shut off is their access to our TMS. First thing, automatically. Then we'll get to the email, we'll get everything else. But there's so much when people have access to everything, even in there. I mean, you've got financials, you've got payables, receivables, you got customers, you got CRMs, you got all that stuff. That is a lot of information, right? And so they gotta exist, they gotta be there. However, the non-compete side of things is tough, but people will sign, like you said, they may get say they're balking at it, somebody's, $5,000 raise, so they get a backpack, or they get it. I remember when I was in college, you think about it, like people are out, they'll go sign for a timeshare so they get a free TV, right? I mean, they'll go you'll be out and about. Some guys got cigarettes if you sign up for like the Marlboro or whatever, And I remember in college, one time we woke up, they're like, hey, man, they're handing out free tickets to Dave Matthews concert. That was at Ball State. It's down at IU, and I'm like, oh, so yeah, all right. So we're all hungover. So we go down there and we go down to the Democratic headquarters. We had to sign up and register as a Democrat, which I didn't at the time. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I don't know anything about politics. I really don't care. So unbeknownst to me, I get free Dave Matthews tickets. That's all I care about. But I'm a registered Democrat for like the first 6 years of my life, out of college. I'm like, and I didn't even know it, right? Because I just signed it because I wanted a certain thing. And so, there's companies that do that, right? Like you said, lawyers are made to trick, right? But they're also, made to protect, because there's a lot of people that have burned, those over the past. But I think if you look at a lot of, one thing I always hear, one name I always hear a lot. So, you talk about C.H. Robinson. We talked about the other day. A lot of the customers I've landed here recently used to be C.H. Robinson. They weren't happy with their service, whatever it was, man. They grow, they get really big. They don't service smaller accounts, whatever. But the other thing is that there's a lot of companies that have like higher level people that, oh, that's a C.H. Robinson guy. That's a C.H. Robinson guy. That's where he learned everything. He was there for 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, right? Or even Tony, right? There's a lot of them that even leave and then go to the shipper side, right? And manage those sides of things. So
I was never a CH.
Well, no, Tony didn't, but I think your main guy, whatever, but
yeah, I know a guy.
Yeah. And so, you see that a lot. I hear that name a lot. And so obviously there's, these people aren't going and sitting down for 2 years. They're going into a new role, right? But there's obviously room, even with a company like CH, to be able to negotiate or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because that's just part of it, I feel.
I think you're exactly right. So what ends up happening with some sophisticated companies is they narrowly define what is a competitive business. They're very specific as to what it is you're not going to be able to do. So maybe it's freight brokering, maybe it's being a motor carrier or something, but it's when they get expansive, it's become less enforceable. I would say, like, in terms of there's again some questions I see about what's a good version of a non-compete. Let's see. How can companies protect themselves when hiring C-level people? Non-competes are going to happen for C-level people. So I'm very bullish on don't give it to middle managers. Don't give it to anybody who's small potatoes. Your C-level people, yeah, but you're going to pay for it because those C-level people have the same lawyers that you do. And they're going to say, okay, I'll sign your 1 year non-compete, but you're going to agree to pay me for 1 year to sit out.
Yep.
I mean, that's what happens at the top echelons. And there are good non-competes. Some non-competes, like when you sell a business, like if the Bodacious Cowboy has an amazing brokerage, he sells it to me and he's like, hey, Matt, I want to make a new brokerage. I'm like, I'm going to sue you and you're not going to do that for 5 years. We're all okay with that. We agree in that sense. But it's these people who, I'm 21 years old. I got my very first job in logistics. It was kind of fun, but my manager was a jerk and I didn't like it. I want to do something different. I went to a new company and I got sued. That's unacceptable. That is not an outcome anyone should be happy with. But for C-level people, for people selling businesses, yeah, I got no problem with non-compete.
But you look at companies too, again, you look at the company situations, like I said before, maybe they're focused on recruiting or whatever it is. But look at C.H. Robinson. I mean, they're probably thinking from the standpoint of they've got, you're not going to go out out revenue that you're not going to take, that much revenue. I mean, they've got everything, they're into everything. So I think they look at it from that standpoint too, but I think they also train well and keep people on longer too, because those people that have left were there 15, 20 years later. But, then you look at somebody like a TQL where they have so many accounts, right? And there's so many branches and so many things broke out that whenever I would hire somebody in sales from a CH Robinson or a TQL, they would come in and I could not get their mindset off of, their way, their idea of bringing on accounts and stuff was the local florist down the road, right? Or some, foreign dude that owns a little grocery store, because there are no leads. There's no leads anymore over there. And so they're going after these. And I'm like, dude, you realize, look at the CRM, go after Dow Chemical, go after ExxonMobil, you could go after I had to literally force the guy that one time, dude, $1 billion companies only. That's it. That's all I want to name. I don't want to hear about Rhonda down the road who's shipping Etsy or whatever, because that's not, 30K a month with her. I don't care. I don't want it. We're not doing it, right? What's her credit? Who knows? This is one of the reasons why I am so okay with non-solicits. When you're effective at what you do, if you're good at what you do, your employer is just renting your contacts. They're just borrowing from you as long as you're there. Because if you're really good, it doesn't matter where you go or what you do. They will find you and they will follow you because you're good at what you do. You have integrity, you have a relationship, you have
whatever it is that you're good at. That's why non-solicits don't bother me so much, but they can be just as damaging because you still have to disclose to a future company. Yeah, I got this this thing that follows me for the next 2 years. Sorry.
Well, not only that, but you also get when you get it to that level where those smaller customers, once you get to the point where that customer's only using you, that's where the companies want to protect themselves, right? Because that's where you can do damage, right? You could leave, and because you got Rhonda and Jose down the road, that's half of that office's bread because you were doing well and you're doing all their, half of that small branch's office's revenue, right? That you're taking away, right? So there's a difference between that and a larger company that has 10 brokers, 15 carriers they're using, right? I mean, like their idea of following you, I mean, you have a relationship, like isn't as important as Jose, who knows you and knows that you'll work well with them and whatnot, right? And so
yeah, but what happens? I mean, to your point, TJ, right? What you just said, you brought those customers in, okay, and now they're their top 10. But without you, you didn't bring that customer in. So why can't you take your customer?
Because it's not your customer. You didn't.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Everything belongs to the company.
You didn't have them sign your own contract. You had them sign a contract with the company, right? You were pushing everything through their TMS. You use if you're with a company, right? You're using the TMS for free. You're using all these resources, everything through there. Now, I think there's a difference if you're maybe an agent or whatever it is. I think each circumstance is different. But that's what the non-solicit really is kind of saying is, and it's not like you can't negotiate, or maybe they'll let you do it. But for them, it's like, hey, as a business, yes, I hired you though to bring on customers for us as a company. That's what you did. And you may have a relationship with them, but you did what you were supposed to. You brought them on. They're our customers, not yours. And so that's part of the non-solicit.
So what happens if that customer goes, you know what? I don't like dealing with you.
That's now Matt, touch on that because that's different. Without you reaching out directly, and they do, there's way
this is why it's if you have a non-solicit, it is really useful for you to talk to a lawyer and say, how do I tell people where I'm going without soliciting? And then I say, this is what you do. And then you're fine because it is about you reaching out. It's about you reaching out. If you don't reach out and they come to you, you're fine. You're fine. And that is
fine. Solicit.
That's right. Exactly. Right. It's a solicit. It's not a non-work together. It's a non-solicit of the people.
Right.
Yeah. I do have a little bit of legal advice, and my other piece of legal advice I have for you, TJ, is how to not become a Democrat or Republican for that matter. Stay away from IU and Dave Matthews. You can't go wrong with both of those. Bad news. Stay away.
Oh yeah, I know. We were sitting as an assembly hall, and it was him and Tim Reynolds, and obviously there's like security guards walking up and down the aisles, and they're like passing so like somebody would light a joint, but they would just keep passing it, like they wouldn't expect it back or anything. That way, they can't really track it down to whose it was or anything. And so it's like coming, and I'm like, what the hell? It's just so foggy in there. It's like you can't not tell. But yeah, I fixed that whole situation. We're good there.
Yeah. Now, when we were talking before we went live, we were talking about like non-competition agreements among business to business contracts.
Yes. Yeah. Touch on that.
And let's just here's the example. You own a restaurant. You sign a deal with Pepsi or Coke. You don't get to have both because those guys are like, no, only ours, no one else's. And we're all like, yeah, you're a business. You can make those decisions. So the deal with Convoy and DAT, the deal that they had was Convoy was told, look, you can use our load board, but don't make a load board. Don't do that. And Convoy's like, okay. And then they're like, maybe we should make one. Oops. And that's like the business to business side where you have very sophisticated entities that have all the money they'd ever need, all the legal services they could want. They can negotiate. They know exactly what they're getting into. What makes it interesting is when people after the fact go, I didn't know any better. I couldn't negotiate. You're worth over $1 billion. Yeah, you're fine. No one's gonna lose any sleep over you. So
and we have your signature right here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. With the non-compete, I actually had a business that basically had a non-compete with a carrier that said, under no circumstances would my product will mingle with my competitor's product on the same trailer.
Oh yeah.
And they would take black shrink wrap it up so they couldn't see their packaging, all this other kind of stuff. I mean, it's bizarre how far this can really go besides the employment side. But it's out there. It's out there.
People get smart. I want to get your take on this, and then we'll get back to the business. But so, for example, somebody like C.H. Robinson, a lot of times what they're doing is getting these customers to sign up for Navisphere, right? Now they're using their TMS, which has a contract involved in it, which I think which is another way of obviously protecting. So say you're an account manager for it. that customer signed up for Navisphere for however many years. So it's not like you can leave and take them anyways, because they got to stay with CH for that. What do you know about that? I always wonder about that.
I mean, it's hard to say on like people use like proprietary software agreements and the terms and conditions that go with those. The advice is always read everything and then redline what you can. In the like Zoom Info is another good example. Like you buy software, you have this access, you have all this data you get, and then you have to do these things you have to agree to. Those are probably fine. If it's a true business to business transaction, it's probably okay.
Okay. All right. And then finish your thoughts on the business to business though.
The good example, it actually is really interesting in our industry. So there was a company, Schneider, that had owner operators, and they used it. So it is a business to business transaction. And Schneider had a rule that said, you can be your own business, but don't haul for my competitors. And you're like, oh, well, that sounds weird, but okay. In that context, it ended up being the case that owner operator was misclassified as it should have been an employee.
Yes.
Because if you go out there and you tell an independent business how to run their business,
no longer
then you can get in big trouble. So when I talk about business to business, I typically mean like you're all incorporated entities. You all have general liability insurance. You all have your access to attorneys. It's not like a guy or gal making a living as a driver and not being able to pull for Werner or for Swift because Schneider gets mad at you. In that case, went to the Seventh Circuit and Schneider lost. I mean, they were an employee ultimately.
Yep. So another question. I was talking with somebody here, a good friend in the industry. He's doing really well. He works for a company, and he's getting caught up in the how there's a lot of agents that are doing well, right? I told him, I said, to do well as an agent, I mean, you got to have, like Jeff's had, who knows how much experience. Right. Some of these guys have had, I mean, they worked to that point. Now, he said he's talking to a couple different ones. There's one that requires him to get an LLC, okay, to do it, right? And that one is the one that actually provides health insurance or health benefits, basically health insurance. The other one doesn't require him to get an LLC, but doesn't provide health insurance. So he's asking me, like basically, what's the reason they want me to become an LLC, right? What's the benefit to them? And what is the benefit to me for doing that compared to not doing it?
So
if you're a freight agent.
In a hypothetical kind of model, because this is a very strange situation. You're generally not going to be able to get insurance if you have a separate LLC. Like you're not an employee. They're not going to give it to you. They might have a discount program or a relationship with an insurance broker.
He may have been mistaken because I like had him like reiterate that. I'm like, wait, they're giving you health insurance if you do wouldn't it be the other way around?
So employers don't want to give you anything. Like, let's just start off with that. Now we do because like we have to retain you, or there's a law that says we have to. So we're like, okay, I guess we're going to have to give this person some benefits. Another thing, just a quick side note, businesses are not job creators. Like customers are job creators. In a business, I want to have as few human beings as possible because human beings are very messy. So to the question of like
expensive
making a LLC versus being an independent, the LLC is designed to protect both parties, but realistically for the hiring entity, because the hiring entity can go back and say, well, they have a business. So like look at FedEx Ground or Amazon. Every one of those drivers at your house is a contractor. None of them work for the company that they have the name on their logos and their outfits. But it's because they can say it's an arm's length transaction. That's why people want you to incorporate, so they can say, no, that's a business. That's a real entity. That's not like a random individual. There's rules in how contracts are interpreted if you have a business versus not a business. So the health insurance piece is strange to me, because if I was a contractor for somebody and I was given health insurance, you're probably an employee. Like, I can't think of a world where you're not. So there could be,
he may have been off on that. But what are the tax? So, and then from the tax side of things too, like I know when you, as a company, when you pay a bonus, right? Or if you structure it or name it a certain thing or whatever, there's certain tax liability on you and them, or just you or just them. Does that play a role in that too? You think the LLC side of things?
Yeah, it makes it easier for people who are paying for a contractor. So I'm not going to withhold any taxes. So none of the Medicaid, none of the Medicare, none of the workers' comp, none of the employment, all of these.
Workers' comp. That's what I mentioned to him. Yeah.
Yeah. So like one of the reasons people were so crazy about AB5, like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. Like AB5 was codification of a law that had been around for a long time. It's like people shouldn't be surprised, but they all were. But the big thing is, if you were misclassifying somebody, the penalties are massive, and you have to go back and get workers' comp, health insurance, all that, and that bankrupts companies. That kills you. So
That's
like,
that's how you figure out who you work for. Who's responsible for the workman's comp? That's how you know who you
Absolutely.
work for.
And you,
Well, the
so
other thing too is that
you have the LLs, like if you get, so I told him, my advice to him was this. I think getting your own LLC, because he was mentioning somebody who did have one, who didn't, I think is a decision you make as personally, in which how it benefits you from the standpoint of, all right, do I make enough now to be able to write and have to pay enough in taxes to be able to write off certain things through the LLC, through my LLC, right? You know, whether it's my home for a home office, what's my car, company car, whatever. Like once you get to that point, I think then it benefits you. But I think if you're just kind of starting and you're starting fresh, I don't think it's anything that I think you could do it, you know, as you go down the road, I think, right?
Well,
Jeff, I don't know, do you have experience with that?
yeah. Well, here's the thing on the LLC. Actually, you should look into S corp instead of an LLC because you're going to have less tax burden if you do it that way.
It's like 7.5 instead of 15 or something.
So let me be very clear for everyone listening to us. Do not take tax advice or legal advice from any of us. You should hire a professional. That's the disclaimer.
It's a suggestion. It really is. But
especially me.
Yeah. I would, I'm just saying, look into that as an option.
Yeah. So the sub S corporation is a classification that taxes you like a partnership, which is a lower type of burden than a normal C corp has taxed twice. It's taxed at the corporation level and at the payment to the individual level. LLCs can be taxed either like a C corp or like a partnership. So there's choices. The only reason you typically get a corporate thing is to protect yourself from liability. A limited liability company is the idea of saying, the business is responsible for things. So if I make an LLC and I take a loan out for a truck, and the truck, I go default. They go after the LLC, not me. Now, if you're an individual sole proprietor, they're going to make you personally sign a guarantee. Like, I'm never going to finance you if you don't sign a personal guarantee. So
I was going to say,
you don't want them to go after your personal goods that you're protecting it.
Any decent lawyer, am I right, Matthew, will get right past an LLC's that's a speed bump, right? More than an obstacle.
What we call it, it's called piercing the corporate veil. It's a very specific thing, but how I would look at, and I've pierced the veil before. So what you look at is say, okay, how much insurance do you carry? Like if you're underinsured, I'm going to take your house. And how many, how do you separate your payroll for your business money from your personal money? Do you use your business stuff for your personal stuff? Like I see how you do it. And like I've frozen people's bank accounts, I've sold people's cars, I've liened people's houses. Like I get my money if I want to get my money. So the goal is always have enough insurance. Just have more. Take whatever you have now and have
the
more.
lead into this. Really, I asked probably too many questions, kind of off topic. But what then? Okay, from that standpoint, is the enforceability, I guess, and are there usually non-competes or non-solicits involved? It does that you as an agent going LLC or not have anything to do with that, or protect you more, give you more freedom, or protect them more?
Yeah. So in terms of a corporate structure, it doesn't matter for the non-competition agreement. Like if I'm trying to enforce it, I just care about what you're doing. And if you work for a company, I'll sue the company too, because the company is now tortiously interfering with a contract, which is my contract with you for the non-compete. Like I will crush everyone. The thing that I want people to think about is that non-competes will go away. They will leave. And our industry is pioneering this. We see the states making the moves. Illinois made some moves. If you're under $75,000, banned outright. Don't get to use them. California bans them outright. Oklahoma bans them. Texas is getting closer to banning them. So the trends of history are going to be these go away. We are the only country kind of in the world that does it the way that we do it. So I am passionate that we will see these things fade over time. Non-solicits are likely to stay here for a while, but they will start to be targeted next. So if you're doing these things today and you're not paying separate money for them, as an employer, you should really consider like maybe giving someone a $5,000 sign-on bonus if they execute the non-solicit. But non-competes, they're for the birds. You can do better.
I think our next, what I want to do, because I think this is very important. I think we could really help solve the problem. People always talk about like, what can I do to help, with global warming or whatever it is. Honestly, I think it's just come up with something to help individuals, and then that starts to grow and starts to kind of go from there, right? And I think we've got a good platform. I think LinkedIn's really helped. I think everything's out there. I'd love to get with you, Matt, one-on-one and get I've got a couple like just blanket non-competes, right? Or not solicits, and have us go through it and give an example and share an example of what to redline, how to redline.
Absolutely.
What would be the best thing to redline, which ones you could probably expect, which ones you probably can't, and share that out there. That way people have that going in saying, okay, now they know, because you read that and you're like, therefore this art thou, and you're like, your head starts hurting. You're like,
King James.
and you don't know what to redline or what would even make sense to redline or what you can and can't. So I think an example of having that, and then that's something that right there, that's just a start too, to help protect people, as especially right now, there's a lot of people moving and shifting and shaking depending on what you're doing. I think that'd be really helpful.
I love that idea. So I did last year, I did a legal training seminar for lawyers on non-competes and that side of thing. And I broke down TQL's non-competition agreement. Because like, they're publicly available. So listen, folks, like if you want to sue someone for a non-compete, like I get to look at them. I get to talk about them. So I'm with you. I think it's really important to go through the whole journey of an applicant. What questions should you ask early? What things should you be aware of? What things should you be following? And then when you get presented with these things, what are your steps to negotiate? Because at the end of the day, everyone has a zone of agreeableness. There's a place where we can all meet. Maybe it's on your side, maybe it's on my side, but there's a place we can compromise. And I love educating people about their rights because no one seems to care about them.
Yeah. And I've always been, for me, I think for the last 3 years that I've been, sharing content on LinkedIn and everything, it really is always based on doing things the right way, right? Doing things, how to do things correctly, right? What your management may not be teaching you, the training. After COVID, when we first started with Cassandra and those guys, I kind of stopped and I didn't realize who all was even following me. I had people reach out. A lot of them were just new, like literally new, like, TJ, I know you haven't been posting, like I really was following your stuff. I was learning a lot and I still get that. And it's like, I didn't realize, you don't even realize how many people just don't know the basics or the way to do things, or they're trained. This is how you do it. This is what you're supposed to do. And it's really not, and it's not a good thing. And so the more I think we've got a good, like I said, LinkedIn right now, especially in this industry, we keep that discussion going. I mean, you see it more and more and more. We get on a bitch about it, spend time doing that, or we can educate. That's how I've always been, I mean, like it's just, I don't want to waste time bitching about it.
We're also siloed, and it's important to break down the silos. So what you guys do here with all the different personas of transportation, you need more maintenance people, I would say. Maybe I could help with that. But I do think that like this is a great forum to help people understand, because you're not going to get these answers online as easily. And we can answer live questions. People kind of say, hey, what is it that we want to talk about? What is the goal we want to see? We all want safer trucks on the road. We want people to be able to provide for their families. These are simple things, but all the other noise distracts us. So hopefully this is something we can keep doing. I love it.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing is don't just understand that, like, especially if you're listening to us now and you have one now, or you're switching jobs, whatever it is, listen to some of this stuff, follow Matt, follow people, look into things, go to podcasts, look them up, because there's other people talking about it, and learn as much as you can, right? Kind of prepare yourself, I think, because there's ways to be prepared. In a market like this, if you're in recruiting or you're somewhere where that you're a little bit at this point, maybe it's not expendable, but like things are, you're gonna have to really perform, right? Or maybe you've even been told that, like, you're gonna have to really perform, because we got to make cuts. Start to prepare yourself a little bit and be ahead of the game. There's nothing wrong with educating yourself.
Yeah,
I've got a laundry list of follow-up questions, so we're going to have to do this again for sure. Because I mean, I have all kinds of questions on like conflict of interest and like.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely.
Ready to go.
Yeah, we should do a part 2.
Anytime. You tell me when you want to talk about anything legal related. I'm happy to join you. I also say get Brandon Weissman. I love Brandon. He has truck safety.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal.
Okay.
He's awesome. And Lauren Began, maritime law. This, like, the thing about law and supply chain, both in the same thing. You can't opt out of them. It's everything. We are all
no drayage on the show.
Yeah.
That'll all be done by robots.
Bring it up. We did not bring it up. See, that was.
And Cassandra does a good job too. She used to. That's how I even met her originally. She came into the training too.
That's awesome.
On that too, and so like the insights, the different ones from different people, and everything like that is what I love about this. So
I collect non-competes like Pokemon cards. Like, I want to have them all. Like,
gotta catch them all.
Who's doing the 18-month? Who's doing the 24-month? Let's find out.
Yeah,
you have a spreadsheet on that, don't you?
Yeah, I should make it. It's all saved.
He does.
I can help you out.
Yeah, he does. Got it.
Well, hey guys, listen. Thanks for the conversation, Matt. Thanks for being on. You guys as well. Lewis is out flying around, probably hauling steel today. I think he's doing that. He's doing that local sometimes. But keep it up. Let's keep the discussions going. And promote it. Don't be afraid to jump in comments and have conversations with people. It just You may end up being wrong, but I do it all the time. I get humbled all the time, and then I just make a joke and divert from it. But I learn, and it's awesome. It's what I always want to do. So thanks for being on, guys. Thanks for
Thanks,
everyone
Matthew.
watching.
Hey,
Great
and remind
questions.
me-
Thank you, Matt.
We'll
We got to
definitely do
stay
a part
friends
two.
with Matthew for sure too, because like he's brutal.
You need a good
he got
accountant,
the
you need a good
monthly check
lawyer, you
from
need a
me.
good doctor. That's your three things.
Yeah, he
Yep.
gets a monthly check from me, so we're good.
and a good maintenance guy.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Absolutely. Take care.
Talk to you.
Adios.
Hi guys,
Have a
thank
good
you.
weekend. Thank you.